Ace Frehley played the first 3 notes, and Slash's face changed. On the 4th note, his eyes closed. On the 5th note, he put his guitar down and left the room. The studio was small. Too small, really, for what was supposed to happen there. A cramped space in North Hollywood, the kind of room where session musicians and touring acts rented time when they needed to work something out away from the big commercial studios. Analog mixing board. Vintage amplifiers with glowing tubes. Cables snaking across a worn carpet. The smell of old wood and solder and decades of cigarette smoke baked into the walls. It was 1987. Late October. Cold outside but warm in that windowless room, the heat from the amplifiers making the air thick. There were 5 people in the studio that night. A session drummer whose name nobody remembers. A sound engineer named Carl who'd worked on albums nobody had heard of. A young guitarist from a local band who'd been invited to observe. And 2 others. Ace Frehley. Slash. Nobody planned for them to be there at the same time. It just happened. Ace had booked the room to work through some ideas for a solo project. Nothing urgent, just experimentation, the kind of playing he did when nobody was watching or judging. Slash had shown up early for his own session, scheduled for 2 hours later, and the studio manager had said, "Come on in, the previous guy's almost done." The previous guy was Ace Frehley. Slash recognized him immediately. Everyone recognized Ace Frehley. The Space Ace. Kiss. One of the architects of an entire era of rock and roll. But this wasn't Stage Ace with the makeup and the smoking guitar and the pyrotechnics. This was just a man in his late 30s, wearing jeans and a leather jacket, sitting on a wooden stool with a Gibson Les Paul, working through scales in a rented studio. "Hey," Slash said, nodding as he came in, his top hat brushing the low door frame. Ace looked up. Nodded back. Said nothing. Slash set his guitar case down in the corner. He'd wait. No problem. The engineer Carl glanced at the clock, then at Slash, a silent question. "You want me to tell him to wrap up?" Slash shook his head. He pulled out his own Les Paul, plugged into an amp in the corner, kept the volume low. Started playing quietly, warming up his fingers, half listening to whatever Ace was doing. Ace played for another 10 minutes. Nothing flashy. Just clean phrases, exploring chord progressions, occasionally stopping to adjust his amp settings. Workmanlike. Professional. The kind of playing that didn't demand attention. Then he stopped completely. Set his guitar on the stand. Stood up. Stretched his back. "You're up," he said to Slash. First words he'd spoken. "Take your time," Slash said. "I'm early anyway." Ace looked at him for a long moment. Those eyes that had stared out from a million posters, a million album covers, now just tired and appraising in the dim studio light. "You play?" Ace asked. It should have been a ridiculous question. Everyone in that room knew who Slash was by 1987. Guns N' Roses was exploding. Appetite for Destruction was climbing the charts. The kid with the top hat and the Les Paul was on his way to becoming one of the most recognizable guitarists in the world. But Ace asked it like he genuinely didn't know. Or didn't care. "Yeah," Slash said. "A little." Ace didn't defend himself. He never did. "Show me something," Ace said. Not a challenge. Not a dare. Just curiosity. The same tone you'd use asking someone what they had for breakfast. Slash glanced at Carl the engineer, who shrugged. The session drummer in the corner had stopped packing up his kit, sensing something. The young guitarist observer froze, realizing he was about to witness something. Slash adjusted his guitar strap. Checked his amp settings. Took a breath. And played. He gave them 3 minutes. A blistering run through blues-based rock that showcased everything he was becoming known for: fluid phrasing, perfect vibrato, that distinctive tone that was already becoming his signature. Technical mastery wrapped in raw emotion. The kind of playing that made producers pick up phones and made crowds forget to breathe. When he finished, The room was silent for 3 seconds. "Good," Ace said. Flat. No inflection. "You learned from the right people." Slash smiled slightly. "Learned from you, actually. Kiss Alive was one of the first albums I studied." Ace nodded. Sat back down on his stool. Picked up his Les Paul again. "You want to hear where you learned it from?" Ace asked. "Sure," Slash said. Ace didn't ask permission from anyone else in the room. Didn't check if it was okay to keep using the studio time. Didn't explain what he was going to do. He just started playing. The first note came out of his amplifier with absolute clarity. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just pure. Clean. Hanging in the air like it had always existed and was only now being revealed. The second note followed. Then the third. Slash's face changed. Something shifted behind his eyes. Recognition. Not of a song or a riff, but of something deeper. A language he'd been speaking without understanding its full grammar. The fourth note. Slash's eyes closed. The fifth note. Slash reached down slowly and placed his guitar on its stand. Carefully. Deliberately. Like he was putting away something he no longer had the right to hold. And then he walked toward the door. Away from the spotlight, Ace made a choice no one expected. Carl the engineer half stood, confused. "Slash? You okay, man?" Slash didn't respond. Didn't look back. His hand found the doorknob. He opened it and stepped into the hallway, letting the door close behind him with a soft click. Inside the studio, Ace kept playing. The solo wasn't flashy. No tapping. No sweep picking. No dive bombs or harmonic squeals or any of the techniques that guitar magazines celebrated. Just melody. Pure, patient, inevitable melody. Every note exactly where it needed to be. Every bend reaching the precise emotional pitch. The kind of playing that sounds simple until you try to replicate it and realize there's nowhere to hide. The session drummer sat motionless behind his kit, sticks held loosely, forgotten. The young guitarist in the corner had stopped breathing. Carl the engineer, who'd worked with hundreds of guitarists over 20 years in various studios, slowly reached over and made sure the tape was rolling. Whatever was happening needed to be documented. Ace played for 4 minutes. Maybe 5. Time became elastic in that room. When he finished, the final note decayed slowly, naturally, until it disappeared into silence. Nobody spoke. Ace unplugged his guitar. Started coiling his cable. "Where'd he go?" Ace asked, not looking up. "Hallway, I think," Carl said quietly. Ace nodded. Stood. Walked to the door. Opened it. Slash was sitting on the floor in the corridor, back against the wall, top hat on the carpet beside him. His head was in his hands. His shoulders were shaking slightly. Ace stood in the doorway, guitar still in hand, looking down at him. "You all right?" Ace asked. Slash looked up. His eyes were wet. Not crying, exactly. Just overwhelmed. "Raw. I thought I understood," Slash said, his voice rough. "I thought I got it. What you guys did. The feel, the phrasing, the space between notes. I've been playing for years thinking I understood." "You do understand," Ace said. "You're good. I told you that. But I don't." Slash stopped. Started again. "How do you make it sound like that? Like every note is the only note that could possibly come next? Like the guitar is just telling the truth?" Subscribe and leave a comment, because some moments only make sense when we remember them together. Ace was quiet for a long time. In the studio behind him, Carl was still sitting at the mixing board, not moving. The session drummer was taking his kit apart in slow motion, trying to be invisible. The young guitarist hadn't shifted position. "You want to know?" Ace finally said. Slash nodded. "Come back inside." Slash stood slowly, picked up his top hat, followed Ace back into the studio. They both sat, Ace on his stool, Slash on an amp case nearby, their guitars across their laps. You learned technique, Ace said. That's good. That matters. But technique is just vocabulary. You're speaking the language, but you're translating from something else in your head. You're thinking, what should I play here, instead of just playing what's already there. What do you mean, already there? Ace picked up his guitar. Played a single note. Let it ring. That note exists whether I play it or not, Ace said. It's already in the room. In the air. In the song that doesn't exist yet. My job isn't to create it. My job is to find it and let it out. He played another note. Then another. Not a scale. Not a pattern. Just notes that seemed to appear inevitably, one after another. You're still trying to prove something when you play, Ace continued. Prove you're good. Prove you practiced. Prove you deserve to be holding the guitar. I can hear it in your phrasing. Lots of notes. Lots of ideas. All of them technically perfect. Slash said nothing. He was listening with the intensity of someone who just realized they were in school. But I stopped trying to prove anything 20 years ago, Ace said. I know I can play. So does everyone else. So now I just find the notes. The ones that are already there, waiting. And I let them happen through me instead of from me. He demonstrated. Played a simple phrase. 3 notes. Nothing complicated. But the space between them, the timing, the slight variation in attack on each one, it was perfect. Not perfect like a metronome. Perfect like breathing. How long did it take you to learn that? Slash asked quietly. I didn't learn it, Ace said. I stopped learning and started listening. Ace stood up. Started packing his guitar into its case. The session was over. His time was up. He'd stayed longer than he'd paid for, but Carl wasn't going to say anything about it. You're going to be fine, Ace said to Slash. You're already better than most guitarists will ever be. You'll sell millions of records. You'll inspire thousands of kids to pick up guitars. That solo you played for me? That'll make you famous. He closed his guitar case. Latched it. But if you want to play like that. He nodded toward his amp, toward the space where those notes had been hanging minutes ago. You need to forget everything you think you know, and just listen. Not to other guitarists. Not to records. Just listen to the silence between the notes. That's where the music actually lives. Slash watched Ace pick up his case and head toward the door. Ace, Slash called after him. Ace turned. Thank you? Ace smiled slightly. The first real expression he'd shown all night. Don't thank me, he said. Just remember this feeling. The feeling that made you put your guitar down. That's the feeling you're chasing. The day you can make someone else feel it, then you'll know you're playing the truth. And he left. What followed silenced everyone in the room. Slash sat on that amp case for another 20 minutes. Didn't touch his guitar. Didn't speak. Carl eventually asked if he still wanted his studio time, and Slash shook his head no. The session drummer finished packing and left quietly. The young guitarist, who would quit music 6 months later, convinced he'd never touch what he'd witnessed, slipped out without saying goodbye. Slash finally stood. Unplugged his guitar. Started putting it away. You get any of that? He asked Carl. Every second, Carl said, gesturing to the tape machine. Don't erase it. Wasn't planning to. Slash finally stood. Unplugged his guitar. Started putting it away. You get any of that? He asked Carl. Every second, Carl said, gesturing to the tape machine. Don't erase it. Wasn't planning to. Slash picked up his guitar case. Stopped at the door. Looked back at the stool where Ace had been sitting. I thought I was ready, he said quietly, more to himself than to Carl. I thought I understood what playing meant. He left without booking another session. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. 3 months later, Guns N' Roses was on the cover of Rolling Stone. Slash was being called the greatest guitarist of his generation. In interviews, when asked about his influences, he would mention Ace Frehley. Always. But he never told anyone about that night in the North Hollywood studio. About putting his guitar down. About sitting in the hallway. About learning that mastery isn't about how many notes you can play, it's about knowing which ones to leave out. Carl kept the tape for 30 years. When he finally digitized his archive, that recording was labeled simply, "The night Slash stopped playing." Ace never mentioned it. He never mentioned most things. That was his way. The guitar Ace played that night sold at auction in 2019. The buyer asked if it had any special history. "Just a working guitar," the seller said. "Nothing special. But some truths don't need documentation. They just need to be witnessed."